Hi, I'm Naomi from Drop-In Designs, and this is video 3 of 3 in the MCN Basics tutorials. So this one focuses on turning and top stitching a nappy, also those little finishing tasks. Well, now apparently the next step is to go and have a chocolate break because your camera battery is going flat and you need to recharge it. It is optional but highly recommended. Now the battery is recharged and we're ready to go. So this is the nappy with the elastics sewn in. Before we turn it out, there's something we want to do. This is the edge of the wing, the corner of it, and what we want to do is just trim that off. So make sure you don't cut the stitching there, but get as close as you can. And we want to do that to all the corners. If there's any other hard corners as well, do that for all of them. What that does is it makes your corner nice and sharp when you turn it out. The other thing you want to do is when you've got curves like this, and some patterns have curves like that on the wing, you just want to, this is the front, you just want to go like this. Little notches around the curve with your scissors, again making sure not to cut into the stitching. And again, this just helps that curve lie flat when you turn it out. So where you've cut those little notches there, the fabric can overlap and it makes it nice and smooth. Now this is my trick for turning it out, and I want to try and make sure that you get to see that all, so do my best. This is the opening of the left. Stick my fingers through there, scrunch the nappy up and into the wing here. So these are my fingers in here. I'm grabbing this wing, I'm pulling it out the hole, and that turns your nappy mostly all out, and then you need to just grab that other wing like from in there and pull that out. Nappy's turned out. And see how quick and easy that was? It doesn't have to be painful. Now I've just got a ruler in here, and I just use my ruler to get into those corners. I'm trying to keep this in your vision, but I'm not doing a very good job. So there we are, straightening out those corners. And then I just give it a quick whip around to get the top out as well, if you can kind of see. So I'm just, if you can see that, taking the corner of the ruler around to try and get that a sharp edge. And then just grab one of these wonder clips and we clip that opening shut so that we can top stitch it. So we're going to top stitch now. Top stitching technically is only necessary to close the top, but I find for the majority of patterns, not all, that it not only makes your nappy look better, but it sits better on as well, because these two wings, like these two sides of the wing, would be held together when they're on the body instead of pulling apart when they're snapped. So if you've got that line of stitching there, it doesn't pull so much. So I find that gives a better fit. That's why I recommend top stitching. Now also you might notice that even though we've sewn this elastic onto the pull so that it rolls in, it doesn't necessarily do that automatically. When you've got 3 layers, it'll work brilliantly, but you need a bit of fiddling around like to get it to sit nicely when you're just using the 2 layers. So normally when I top stitch on Minky, I just do the front and the 2 wings. Because we've done the pull, if you top stitch around the elastics, it'll sit much nicer. And I'll show you how to do that a good way, because I do know that when you top stitch around the elastics it can make them not so springy, but there's a couple of things you can do to mitigate that, so I'll show you as we get to it. Alright, so I've just threaded my machine with matching thread. It's especially important on pull to use either something that matches or contrasts well, depending on what look you're going for, because you're going to see it. With Minky, I pretty much just use white all the time because the fluff covers it. You can see the stitch line, but you can't see the stitches unless you look really closely. If you've got a really short pile Minky though, sometimes you need to use a coordinating thread. Again, entirely up to you. Other thing we need to do, what that does is moves my needle over to the far left. That simply makes it easier to sew around snaps, and you might have noticed that I've changed my foot back to my regular foot because quite frankly top stitching with a walking foot is a pain in the behind. It's just too big to get around the snaps. It just doesn't work unless you leave a huge gap between your snaps and your edge, or you try and sew really closely to the edge, but that again has its problems, and I'll explain that in a minute. And of course up to my 3 stitch length. Alright. Now technically you can start wherever you want when you're top stitching. I just like to start it's a bit tricky to get in there. I like to start at the front just because that gets it closed off straight away. Your turn through hole, that is. So we just put it in. You can top stitch really closely to the edge. What I do is, it's probably about 0.5 mils, maybe between 0.5 and a centimetre. Just means that you don't accidentally run off the edge. The other thing is you won't notice I'll go fairly fast, not super quick, but you know, a little bit fast as I'm top stitching. But when you're starting out, you want to go slow and get used to it. I got so frustrated with top stitching when I started because I was trying to do it fast and I just kept running off edges and making a mess of it. But once you get used to it, you can go a bit faster. But start out slow. That's my best recommendation. Alright, so we do our lock stitch. And as I go, I'm pulling the edges out here to try and get them nice and crisp. And that's the thing with sewing, you don't have to sew willy-nilly just as it goes in the machine. You can stop and adjust at any time. And I think that's something a lot of people don't kind of realise, and that's why they don't get the results they're after. There's nothing wrong with stopping and adjusting to make it look better. I'm trying not to knock the camera over with the rest of the nappy as I'm going around it here. But here now I'm going over the top stitch of the turning hole. And you just want to, you can see there where the edge of the fabric is that you've turned over, and you just want to try and make sure that your needle is on the right side of that so that that gap does close. So when I go around this corner here, we're going to get to the elastic. So we want to sew up to the edge of the elastic, and I can feel it there. So we sew up to that. And what we do is we turn it so that it's running parallel to the edge of the elastic, and you just want to go in a couple of stitches. So I find 4 or 5 works best. And then you turn it back. So what you're doing here is, as you're top stitching around the elastic, you're making sure that you're giving it plenty of space for it to spring back. So I've got 1mm elastic, and I'm lining this up with the 10mm, and I'm lining it up with the 10mm mark here. But remember, I've got my needle over here, so there's a little more than a centimetre there for the elastic to fit into, and that helps it spring back. You want to make sure that you do not sew over your elastic with your straight stitch when you're top stitching, because that straight away will stop it springing back as well. And then you want to kind of do it as you did when you were sewing your elastic in. So you pull your elastic straight and you sew, and you're pulling from the back, and I've just got my finger on the edge of the elastic there, so as I'm sewing I can make sure that the elastic is not going under the needle. So I don't know if you can see there's a little bit of a ridge there, and that's what I'm keeping my finger on, just to make sure that there's plenty of room for that elastic and the needle is going to the left of the elastic there. So we're constantly readjusting and making sure that we're sewing that as flat as possible. So it is a bit tricky, but the results are worth it. I think this is one of those things where you can have it quickly or you can have it done right, but you can't necessarily have both. Alright, and I can just feel the edge of the elastic's gone under there, so a couple more stitches, and then we turn it back, and again parallel to the elastic, and we do the same amount of stitches that we did when we went out. So we go back in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so here's our finished nappy. There we go, all done. Now, good luck with making your own. Thanks for watching.